All right, we are live from Hawaii. Aloha, everybody. I'm Gabe Morales, and you are viewing the Gangsters, Cops, and Politicians new YouTube channel that I've created. And we've had a lot of good feedback so far. If you like what you've seen, please hit the like and subscribe button. That's very important for us to get our stats up as a new channel. And today we have a guest who obtained his Bachelor of Science degree from Fresno State University back in 1990. And since that time, he has had a very illustrious career in the criminal justice system. He worked a variety of positions, and I'm very, very excited to hear about some of the things that he has done. I know he has some good stories for us. I think I first met him when he's with Sacramento PD at a gang conference or something like that.
Yeah, I would have been down in Anaheim, California at CGIA.
All right. So Chris Mouzis.
Mouzis, you're good. It all pays the same, right?
Mouzis. I'm sorry. Yeah.
No, that's okay. Actually, you've said it the correct way in Greek. Mouzis.
Okay. All right. See, I was right. Okay.
Yeah.
Chris, that's how I know you as Chris.
That's right.
So Chris, how are you?
I'm well, and yourself?
I'm doing great here in Hawaii. Thank you, brother. You look great.
Thank you for having me on. Thank you. I appreciate that. Retirement really does a lot to your health and well-being. That's for sure.
Amen. Yes. Yes. I definitely feel a stress release. I think at first, when I first quit, I had a little bit of withdrawals, but it has gotten better all the time. Yeah. Yeah. I'm liking that. I'm liking that retired life, or some of my retired life. So Chris, tell us, where were you born and where'd you grow up?
I was born and raised in the Sacramento Valley in California, in the city of Pacoima. It's where my mom still lives. My dad passed away a couple of years, but they live there. Again, raised me there. Went through parochial school all throughout my childhood there, and went to parochial school in high school, and then ultimately ended up California State University of Fresno. All
right. Well, Pacoima, I just did a radio show. You know, I got a new radio show out here. I've been DJing. I'm pretty excited doing that, learning the DJ skills. And we featured Richie Ballins, of course, from your city there, Wednesday.
Live right down the street from Richie Ballins, well, is now Richie Ballins Park.
Wow. Yeah, that's, you know, yeah, that was probably amazing time. It was before our time, but, you know, hey, it's still pretty cool to know about that. And San Fernando Valley is just north of LA for people who may not know where the San Fernando Valley is located. And then, of course, Fresno's there in Central California. We have viewers from all over the United States. So just gave you a little geography lesson. And then Sacramento, of course, in Northern California. When I worked at Folsom Prison, I lived in Sacramento. So I drove down many of the same streets probably that Chris did.
That's right.
So, Chris, when you were growing up, did you encounter any gang members?
You know, it's funny when thinking back now that I know what I know, especially working gangs. I was very fortunate to have both parents in the home that were very active in my life, and obviously I can't believe my mom still lives in the same house that she does, because it's riddled with gangs now. But knowing what I know now and looking back at the friends that I had, there's no doubt that some of my closer friends were gang members. But I just didn't know anything different, because I was always staying active, involved in sports and the church stuff. And my parents just kind of kept an eye on us. And so knowing what I know now, there's no doubt. I remember walking to school and coming across a homicide victim still laying out in the street, stabbed overnight, and the police just showing up. And really kind of, that seemed a little weird, but I don't know how I kind of stayed out of it, but I certainly did. And
right. So it was around you, but it didn't directly affect you.
No, I had a friend that ended up going to prison for the rest of his life that I played baseball with. And again, knowing now, it was because he was involved in one of the gangs that was down in the valley where we lived.
Mhm. So what made you decide to get in law enforcement?
You know, I didn't have anything in my family, no family members that were. I when just out of high school and kind of coming back home for the summers, I ended up working security at Magic Mountain, and which is a large amusement park for those that aren't familiar with it. And my cousin was a security guard there, and he got me involved in that, and it kind of got my interest into doing that. And it was about the time when the movie Colors was coming out. And at the theme park there where we worked at the front gate, we started to have LA County Sheriff's Department kind of stand there with us and sort of introduced us to what regarding gangs and kind of things like that, because I really didn't know anything about that. And so based on that, and then of course going to college, my focus turned towards criminology and in the law enforcement field, and that's kind of where it started.
Very good. And then, so what agency or agencies have you worked for and with over the course of your career?
So I started off as a reserve deputy with the Fresno County Sheriff's Department, that was actually run through the criminology program at Fresno State. It's a unique program where in your junior year, they put you through a level 2 reserve academy, and then they allow you to work and patrol with deputies how often you want to. And so I did that. And then unfortunately, there was a kind of a statewide hiring freeze, for lack of a better phrase. It was tough to find a job in law enforcement at the time. And then ultimately in 1992, I was hired by the Sacramento Police Department as a community service officer, which puts you through a full-time academy. And then when jobs opened up, they allowed you to basically upgrade to a police officer.
Got you. So what precinct did you start off with there at Sac PD?
So then it was broken into basically 4 different sectors. You had the north area, you had the downtown area, east and south, and majority of my patrol career was in the south part of Sacramento.
Okay, so I know exactly where that's at. Proper
Yes.
Franklin Boulevard. Yeah, they put a new station there right before I left Folsom, and had a beautiful mural, I believe, that was made by Juanicia Orozco. Did I believe the tile mural? At least he participated in that. That's a beautiful.
It's a beautiful mural. Yeah, I'm not sure who the artist was, but it certainly is. It certainly stands out.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. That's well, like a lot of neighborhoods. I mean, there's a lot of good people that live there, and business people and stuff. But that neighborhood did have some gang problems. Barrio Frontron, I remember they called it, and putting that police station there right in the middle of it helped. Definitely helped. I think with police presence. Of course, it didn't solve all the problems, and they'll never totally be solved. But so you worked then first as a patrol officer, and you moved up the ranks to supervisor, correct?
I from patrol in 2003, I made detectives, and that's where I got introduced into gangs full time, and that's majority of my career was spent working gangs since that time, and then ultimately I ended up getting promoted to sergeant in 2014, I think it was.
All right. And so, I towards the end of my career, I became a supervisor, and it was really interesting the difference between. Can you tell us some of the differences between working as a line officer and supervisor? Some of the challenges you faced. It's definitely a different role, but there's also some. I want to say politics, or the culture. It's kind of interesting. Then you're no longer one of the boys. Now you're one of the bosses. And of course sergeant, like me, was kind of a mid-level rank. So you still were very close to the line. You supervise people on the line, but What kind of changes do you kind of recall that was different from being a line patrol officer to being a supervisor, being a sergeant?
You know, thinking back, I think one of the biggest differences is that you were just no longer responsible for yourself and yourself, whether you're the well-being of yourself, kind of the morale that you played out. Whereas with being a sergeant, you're responsible for not only understanding what the line, what your the officers that you're supervising, what kind of morale that you could see from them, but you also had to make sure that the policies and the missions of our department were kind of funneled down and that the officers had to buy in. And so that at times that was a little difficult. And of course, at the end of my career, that's when technology really started to change regarding body-worn cameras. And so, of course, with any change, at any part of your career, there's always that pushback. And especially when it came to oversight, it was tough. Well, I wouldn't say tough, but it was a challenge to get them to buy into that.
Yeah. Yeah, I experienced that too, some resistance from some, not all. I had a lot of staff that were great, but there were some that definitely, challenged me. And, I had to step up my leadership skills. Like you said, you're no longer just an individual player, you're a team leader. And, you try to get everybody on board and like I said, with policies and stuff. And then, of course, you're not trying to burn everybody or, write them all up. You don't want to
Yeah.
approach it that way. But when you did finally come to the point where, hey, the guy's just not getting the message, and they got angry sometimes. And I said, hey, I'm doing this to protect you and your job. I'm not doing it for me. I'm actually doing it for you, believe it or not. I'm trying to look out for you, man. Trying to keep you out of trouble.
And that was the other thing too, is again, because patrol work and kind of my entire career, it was a blast. And getting back into uniform after being in a plainclothes undercover capacity for so long, to get back out in the streets, I just wanted to get in the mix again. I wanted to make the traffic stops. I wanted to make the arrests. I wanted to do this and do that. Whereas, wait a minute, now I'm creating more work for my patrol people because I can't be taken off the streets to go book someone inside the jail because I have to be able to be available for some other critical incidents. So that was a challenge personally for myself, and having to kind of take a step back and allow them to do what they do.
Yeah, it's definitely, a tough job. I mean, my hat's off to, supervisors, especially today. Things have really, the heat has been turned up as law enforcement, being under a microscope and stuff. And yeah, a lot of times, that supervisor, they're the ones that got to set the tone, and it's not always, it's not always nice. You sometimes you feel like you're the bad guy, but like I said, I would try to say, hey, I'm trying to help you out, believe it or not, because, people above me are putting the heat on me, and I'm just trying to make it easier for all of us. So Chris, I know you worked undercover, you worked a lot of different capacities. Are there any incidents, gang related or non-gang related, that still stand out in your mind today where you thought, wow, not sure how I'm going to get out of this one, but you did. How did you, what was the situation and how did you get out of it?
So kind of along those lines, part of, actually probably a majority of my investigative career was working with the FBI on a Safe Streets task force up here in Sacramento. And I can't necessarily get into the specifics of it, but I ended up having to, there was a pretty, and it was not really outside the scope of gangs. They brought me in because of my undercover, because back then I had very long hair, facial hair, all that stuff you would think. And so they needed someone to be in close proximity with this target that they were following from Southern California up towards the Canadian border. And so part of that trip was to, and he was taking a bus at that time. He was taking Greyhound. So because Sacramento was a kind of a hub and kind of a transition where all these different routes took off, they asked me to get on the bus with him. And it kind of, right from the very word go, it was a mess up because my partner ended up getting on the wrong bus. And because there's two buses heading towards Oregon, and one was a direct or a more direct, and one had made all these other stops, I ended up picking the correct one and was on the bus with this guy by myself. Fortunately, there was a surveillance team, but that's where the comical stuff comes in. So we get on the bus, and there are people in the back that immediately started using narcotics right away. I'm thinking, this is how it's going to go. So watching them do this, I had a guy that was had some mental issues and was talking to himself the entire time right in front of me, hitting the seat, hitting the back seat, rocking back and forth, pulled out a guitar and just started strumming a single note for well over an hour, just one at a time. And it sort of, make a long story short, because it's a very funny story. The surveillance team, it was late at night, maybe past midnight, and I-5, as you're heading towards the Oregon border, it's really, there's not much traffic. And our surveillance team, I don't know why, because they're in communication with me, they kept passing the bus over and over and over. And at one point, the bus driver got off the off-ramp and then immediately got on the on-ramp, just like you would think counter surveillance was doing.
Yeah.
And so as I came to find out, the bus driver
ditched the guys.
bus driver picked up surveillance.
Yeah.
And so these guys had to completely back off. And then when we finally got to the end of my route, where we're going to do the exchange with the other agents, the bus driver got out, went and confronted the agent in the undercover car, asking him what the world was going on, why he was following him all the way from California. Right. And so it was just unreal. But it was fun.
No. Yeah. Oh man, I could just see you, man, sitting with that guy. How annoying, huh? And you're like, hey, this is how the trip's gonna go, huh? And then your buddy, he took the scenic route, huh?
Well, I just went home after that because there's no point. They're never going to catch up.
Yeah. Okay. Gotcha. Okay. Gotcha. Oh man, sounded like it was kind of a mess there, man. Oh yeah.
It was.
But you survived it and then lived to tell the tale.
That's right.
And so what made you decide to retire, and when did you retire, and what have you been doing since?
Yeah, so I turned 50 in a little over 3 years ago, and it was kind of during that time I was supervising our criminal intelligence unit at the police department, and there were some critical incidents involving demonstrations, things like that. That's when kind of the demonstrations really started to really up their game. And there were protests, obviously being a capital city in California, you get quite a few protests. And part of the intelligence unit is to know what's going on. And so I was dealing with that a lot. And I knew that there were some openings in the county as investigator that I thought I could be able to do, because I knew I was towards the end anyways. And obviously with the retirement system here in California, we get paid very well, and very fortunate to be able to do that. And so I got hired by the county and working at the public defender's office in Sacramento County as an investigator, which was obviously a unique experience in and of itself, because the focus is a little different than what I had done 26 years worth of doing. So,
well, that's what I was going to ask you next. So now, basically, now you're on the other side of the fence, right?
Yes.
And everybody, this country here, everybody deserves, fair trial and all that. So there may be some people, I know a lot of people say, that's, you went over to the dark side. They're probably saying,
all the time.
you probably
Oh,
get
yeah.
all that, but hey, any one of us may need defense, and I don't know, about everybody out there, but I know I couldn't afford a private attorney. I'm probably looking at, a public defender, and I'm hoping I get a good one that cares, about my innocence if that's the case. So yeah, I'm sure that's feels quite a bit different, but I'm glad you're there, and I know you're a good person, so
Oh,
we're
thank you.
lucky to have you, because I know you've always been fair. I remember when I first met you, I said, hey, this guy, I remember you, and hey, this guy cared. He stayed alert. He was taking notes, paying attention. And I can't say that about everybody, but you definitely, I remember you very well. And we have followed up over the years, in communication on different matters.
Yes.
And so I'm glad you're here today on the show to
Thank
tell us a little bit about your experiences. Chris, I know it's been a long time since you were a brand new officer, but
Yeah.
and a lot of times since you were a young, teenager, and of course things have changed since when we were growing up. But if you were a young man or woman today and gangs were approaching you, what kind of advice would you have for them to try to avoid that lifestyle?
That's such an interesting and difficult question. And I'll answer it the way that I believe that I stayed out of it. And that is, stay as active as possible in any kind of curricular activity. Obviously, there are many homes that don't have both parents in the home. Maybe it's a foster care setting. Maybe there's all kinds of different challenges out there. But the one thing that I always remembered is that I didn't have time for anything else, whether, I'll use the word, nefarious activities, because I was just so darn involved in playing baseball, sports, all of that stuff. And that's the one thing, is to find something that you enjoy doing that is going to take up your time. Because again, idle minds end up heading down, looking for things that to take up that time. And if you're around it and that's all there's there, then there's always the chance that you're going to end up getting sucked into that lifestyle. And that's what, throughout my career, that's what I saw. These kids that they go home, they do nothing. And then at school, they're surrounded by these gang members, and then they get brought into that lifestyle. And that's kind of where they took the wrong path. So fortunately, that's where I took the correct path.
So what I hear you saying then, Chris, is, find your passion, find some kind of hobby, whether it be sports or music or anything, writing, anything to express yourself in a positive manner versus a negative manner, and drug usage and underage drinking and all that kind of running the streets and all that kind of stuff that comes with, gang members, or just kids that get in trouble, whether they're gang members or not.
That's exactly it.
So as a new officer today, and you already know, man, things have changed, as far as policing. If you were a brand new officer coming out of the academy today, what kind of advice would you have for that young person, that young officer hitting the streets today in today's policing world?
There's a couple different things. One, I'll take from what the reason why many gang members kind of what they want, and that's respect. And there's nothing wrong with wanting respect. I think everyone in this world wants respect. So treat people with respect. If you don't treat people with respect, then you end up having, you create problems for the department, you create problems for yourself. You add on to this distrust of law enforcement. And so you just give it a bad eye. And the other thing is And I think this is kind of where I think I succeeded in my career, is don't take the job personal. Yes, it's a difficult career, and you need to want to do this job, and it's a fun job, and I enjoyed every minute of it. But my entire identity wasn't wrapped around the job. So when I walked away from it, I think I was able to, again, mentally, I was able to kind of step away from it a lot easier. And I didn't, if I took the job personal, then I would sort of, if someone got one on you, maybe the guy you were chasing had methamphetamine, that you knew he had methamphetamine, and they got rid of it. And so you weren't able to arrest him on that occasion. If you took that personal, then there's a chance that you may try to shortcut some things in order to be able to make that arrest. And if you don't take it personal, you know what? You're just going to have a successful career.
Very good.
Hang on, what? Hey. And so those are the two things, the words of advice I think I have.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I remember being a new officer, straight out of the academy. And of course they teach you a camaraderie, and of course you're part of the team. But, I seen some officers get caught up in it. We used to call it choir practice. After shift, they would go and drink down at the local, bar right across the street from Folsom Prison. And then they would, kind of debrief, but then it would get even more, then bitter towards certain inmates, like you said, and towards administration. And pretty soon it becomes that us versus them mentality. And then pretty soon it becomes, your whole life, you don't even socialize with anybody other than officers, maybe your wife. And then even then, sometimes you start shutting down your spouse and, letting that stress, like you said, taking that home, or not dealing with it very well by drinking and other negative types of behavior. So yeah, it was interesting to see, because I saw some officers become part of cliques, really almost like gangs. This very groups that they were talking bad about and were against, they actually were becoming that way. And a lot of times they didn't even see it. And then it was too late, and then they would do something, dirty, or get caught up in something, and excessive force, that kind of thing. And we all seen that happen. So that's unfortunate. So yeah, definitely, for you new officers out there, we have a lot of criminal justice students and new officers that view our channel. Heed the advice of Chris, and my other guests have been on here, man. Don't fall into those traps. It's so easy. Now, Chris, I'm not trying to get you in trouble here. I know you're there in Sacramento. They're at the Capitol, and there's a lot of politicians walking around. But if you were a politician today, an elected official, know what you know today about the criminal justice system, as far as what works and what doesn't work, what kind of policies, what kind of changes, kind of laws would you implement?
So you had actually offered me this question kind of ahead of time, so that way I can kind of think about it. And it really is, it is a tough one, but and it's because of the job that I do now, and I see the other side of the fence, and I read the reports that law enforcement write as when I get assigned an investigation. So I read the reports, and I see the evidence that's presented, and there have been far too many cases that I've seen come through our office that should never have been charged. There's probable cause, which again, when a patrol officer makes the arrest and they have probable cause to make the arrest, that's fine. Whether or not it's enough to prove beyond a reasonable doubt is entirely different situation. And so and there's no, and I don't see any accountability on that side of it to prevent the overcharging of a lot of these different matters. Obviously, there are a majority of the matters that come through our office. Yeah, you know what, they may have done that, and so I can see why it's charged. But there's quite a few that come through that just should never make it through into the process, which then ends up, so you have the individual that was arrested that has maybe lost the job as a result. Then you have all the different resources that the district attorney's office is having to put into the case. And then you have all the resources that the public defender's office or private counsel, whatever it is, that are having to put into a case that never should make its way through. So I think there's got to be some accountability on kind of on that side of the fence in order to prevent some of these things from even getting to that point. And so that's kind of one of the things that I was that, again, it's kind of an enlightening thing coming over working with on the public defender side. And it's just, it becomes unfair. And the criminal justice system is built upon fairness. And when you see things that are happening that are unfair, it's a tough thing to see. And it's a tough, and that's which, you know, at the very beginning where you talk about having investigators, or if you were arrested and you want a public defender, you'd want to have both sides of the fence have to have the best attorneys on the prosecuting the matter, best attorneys that are defending the matter. And the same way with investigators, you need to have qualified, competent investigators there, and the same over on the defense side of it. And that's where I get a lot of joy out of what I do, because I play a role in this wheel that we all are involved in. And so, and I want to make sure that, again, I was hoping that as a cop, I'd be held accountable. And one way is if there's an arrest that maybe shouldn't have happened, then the court process should adjudicate that appropriately. And if it's done the right way, which a lot of cops do, and the majority of cops do, then it goes down the path it's supposed to.
So what I hear you saying, Chris, is there should be some quality control as far as cases that are submitted to the prosecutor and followed through. And that is probably the case sometimes, but then there's other times where it just isn't there. And you don't have to answer this, but I always had some problems with the plea bargain. I would hear inmates a lot of times say, you know, hey, I didn't do it, but I want to take the deal because I'm looking at 2 years versus 20. And I could tell they felt pressured, but they profess their innocence. And who am I to say I didn't, you know, try the case, and I wasn't the arresting officer, I didn't gather the evidence. But just the fact that they were tormented, you know, by, you would think if you're innocent, hey, fight the case, but they're like, nah, you know, I feel like I'm going to get railroaded, and I'm going to get 20 years. I must just take the 2 years and get it over with. And a lot of times they had already done a year in jail awaiting trial. The process is so slow. It's supposed to be, you know, a quick and speedy trial, and that's not always the case either. So, you know, sometimes due to the system, and sometimes due to maybe people dragging their feet. But yeah, that definitely, and that's probably another show we'll do another time. Maybe we can come on a panel or something when we talk about that. Oh, that's very important, and we're talking about reforming the criminal justice system, and you know, and there's some people that belong in jail and prison. I think most people agree with that. And then there's a lot of people who don't necessarily need to be there or shouldn't have got there. And yeah, we need to, I think, totally, you know, improve the system. I am for criminal justice reform if it's done the right way, and with people like yourself that know the problems, and not just people saying, hey, you know, hey, I got a bright idea, and just come with it having no background, no knowledge whatsoever about the system and how it really works. So, Chris, is there any final thoughts you'd like to give our viewers?
Yes, police work in general is fun. It was again, I'm so proud of the work that I did and the people that I met in my career, and I had a blast. It's the best job in the world, as they say, and I got paid very well to be able to do something I enjoyed, and that's what my grandfather always told me, is that it doesn't matter what you do in this life as long as you enjoy doing it. And I think that I was able to do that, and so I hope those that are getting into it, they want to be able to do it, because you need to want to do this job, especially law enforcement, because it's not made for everyone, and that's kind of my parting words for that.
Well, that's great. Thank you. Sometimes I get criticism also and flack for even bringing up some of these subjects. I think we need to talk about it. It's and be real with people, educate the public, and admit that we have more than just a few bad apples, but the vast majority of officers are good officers. I also point out sometimes we have some lazy officers. People always point towards the excessive force and the dirty cops. We also have some officers who didn't do it, did the bare minimum or sometimes less. And I know you are not one of those officers. I know your reputation, brother. You still have a good reputation, and I know you still care, and you're a good person. And that's why I wanted to have you on the show. That's the kind of people I want on this show. If you're interested in being on our show, hit us up if you have a subject matter you'd like to talk about. And we'll get you on here and talk like we had my buddy Chris here. Well, Chris, mahalo, as we say here in Hawaii. Thank you for coming on once again and being honest with you. I'm happy to see that now you're retired, enjoying life. You're doing a new thing, new adventures. But if you're ever here in Hawaii and you want the local boy tour, look me up, brother.
All right, thanks, brother.
All right. Aloha. Okay.
Aloha.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.